Luthra, the Israel-Iran conflict has escalated as the United States joins forces against Iran. United States President Donald Trump warns of a regime change days after striking Iran's nuclear sites. This even as his deputy maintains that America is at war with Iran's nuclear program and not with the nation. Israel says it wants to wrap up the war as soon as it can and continues targeting its long-standing enemy. Iran says it has hit a United States military base in Syria days after warning that any American asset in the region was a potential target. China and Russia condemned Washington for the strikes. Arab nations expressed dismay but stopped short of condemning the Trump administration. The US's direct involvement in the war has heightened tensions in the region. India, which shares good ties with both Israel and Iran, has urged de-escalation. To take this forward, I'm now joined by Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate and Chair on the India and Emerging Asia Economics at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He's also the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development. Also on the show with us is Strategic Affairs expert Anju Gupta. She's also the former Director General of UP Police and someone who understands terrorism very well as far as the Indo-Pacific region is concerned and also in West Asia. Let me now go across to Raymond Vickery first. Raymond Vickery, the implications for the United States. It's been almost 48 hours since the United States carried out those strikes. Iran is bound to retaliate sooner or later. What are some of the short-term, medium-term implications that you see for the U.S.?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that this requires very careful thought on behalf of the U.S. Administration. The question is how best to build peace and prosperity in the world. It's not a question of national glorification or the glorification really of one man. President Trump has seen both domestically and internationally that his duty is really to transaction, to greater glorification of himself rather than institutional approaches which build peace and prosperity in the long run. I think that what we have to do is distinguish between short-run consequences and longer-run consequences. In the short run, we in the United States have experienced military success in Afghanistan, in Iraq. You could even include Libya and going back even further to Vietnam. But in the longer run, it hasn't worked out. Now, what will happen in the short run, of course, is important because retaliation often breeds retaliation and leads to a downward cycle. One hopes that will not be the case. But even if the United States should have continued military superiority and success along with Israel, in the longer run, what happens? Iran is talking about leaving the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that any hope of inspections by IAEA will go out the window. And even if there is regime change, the question is, what kind of regime? It is possible to get an even more radical Iranian regime. So it seems to me that what needs to be done is to try to return to a path of seeking peace and prosperity through institutional means.
Raymond Vickery, do you believe that the U.S.'s objectives here by entering and supporting Israel in the war are clear? And are those objectives and aims backed by strong evidence and facts?
No, I don't believe that our relationship to Israel is properly defined. It seems to me that what we've seen with President Trump is sort of an evolving approach without any overall strategic consideration of what the United States' interests are. As you may recall, his Secretary of State, and he really is saying when this first happened, that this was a fight between Israel and Iran. Now, in his later statements, he's saying, well, we coordinated with them all the time. And I think you're quite right to point out what is the strategic relationship. It's not just with Iran, it is what happens across the Middle East. Gaza has
Right.
not been a success, and so we need to get that straight. Domestically, I'm very concerned that Trump, having come in with at least an abhorrence of violence, is now getting a taste for violence as the way in which to further national interest without any consideration or without proper consideration of
Okay.
overall strategic concerns, which you indicate.
Right. My final question, Raymond, Vickery, would be about China. Perhaps the only country which has vehemently opposed and condemned what has happened is China. What role do you expect them to play, considering they are the biggest beneficiaries of oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz? They have close linkages with Iran as well.
Well, I think that it's quite proper to raise China, particularly in the context of what happens with other great democracies like India. This is not happening in a vacuum. You could say, well, it's in China's interest to keep the Straits of Hormuz open. And that's certainly true. But under what circumstances? Do they get drawn into this to keep the straits open? And if they do, isn't that a continuation of this sort of string of pearls approach surrounding India? So the question of what happens with China and indeed with Russia are fundamental here. And then you get other consequences in terms of what China thinks about bombing as a way to get what it wants.
Yeah.
The problem is here to avoid World War III. The problem is to rein in the nuclear Armageddon, which has continued to face the world. And this is not the way in which to do that.
All right. Thank you so much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us on the program. Let me also get in Anju Gupta at this point. Anju Gupta, the United States, by hitting Natanz, Isfahan and Fordo, what has it really achieved, considering the Iranians are saying that all these sites had been evacuated and there is no significant damage?
Good evening, Parikshit. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, if we look at their objectives, there may be three objectives for these strikes. One is to prevent the development of nuclear weapons by Iran. And for that, hitting the nuclear site would have meant destroying the centrifuges which enrich uranium and enrich uranium. And has it been achieved? The Iranians are saying no, that they had already removed a lot of it. They kind of had a hunch that this was going to happen. Americans are saying they have been successful. The only way to verify it could be either through international inspections, which are very difficult now, because Iran will have to be brought on board, or by invading Iran and taking control of Iran. So that's the only way these claims can be, the claim by US can be verified about destroying centrifuges and enriched uranium. Second, objective was to get Iran to halt its attacks on Israel. Well, within few hours of this, US targeting of the nuclear sites in Iran, Iran mounted very vicious aerial attacks on Israel, on Haifa, on Tel Aviv. Then the third objective was for Iran to agree to zero enrichment, that Iran will not keep any capability to enrich uranium at all. That was the sticking point, in fact, before the sixth round, which was going to happen 3 days before, 3 days after the Israel mounted attacks on Iran. Now, Iranian president has said it very clearly that this is not acceptable to Iran, even after these strikes. So on the face of it, it is very doubtful if the three immediate objectives that one can think of which the US had in mind, mounting these, targeting the nuclear sites, it's doubtful if they've been met.
Okay, just to ask you about the worry around radiation. So far, there are no reports saying that there has been leak of any radioactive material, but considering that further US strikes cannot be ruled out, Israel has again struck the Fordo site. What's the larger worry for India in case there is any kind of leakage of radioactive material, and is that even possible?
Why it is possible is because, yes, targeting of centrifuges and enriched uranium is not going to cause that kind of radio clouds. But in this business, there would be research reactors, there would be what they call spent fuel, high-level waste. These are radioactive material. Now, if they get targeted, and nobody knows where they're stored, now, if they get targeted by accident, inadvertently, then there will be a problem. And they have a nuclear reactor at, another nuclear reactor, which has not been targeted because Russia has warned against touching it. Russians are working there. So if radioactive material gets targeted, there will be radioactive clouds. And these clouds move very fast and they can spread anywhere given, the condition of winds and the direction and other factors. And they can reach as far as India. Why not? Let's recall what happened in Chernobyl in 1986, when there was an accident at Chernobyl, which was part of the USSR, former USSR. The radioactive clouds could be, they spread throughout the northern hemisphere. And this activity was also detected in the US, in Canada, and in Japan. So that could be the spread of radioactive clouds. So India is right there. We are not very far from Iran. And secondly, let's not forget, we have very large population in the Gulf region. They are also our interest.
Right. And we have about 10,000 people in Iran,
Yes.
even though around 1,400 or 1,500 of them have been evacuated so far. Let me ask you about this whole issue around regime change. Israel spoke about it. Donald Trump seems to be supporting it as well. But who will the United States and Israel actually bring up? What about Khamenei's own successor in Iranian politics?
It is really ironic that when President Trump started this whole US-Iran talks, he actually wrote to Khamenei, the supreme leader, because everybody knows in Iran it's the supreme leader who has the final say. So he wrote to Khamenei asking for this direct dialogue, and 5 rounds had, taken place very peacefully. Somehow in the middle of all this, US administration is certainly talking about regime change, targeting of supreme leader. It looked like war rhetoric, but let's assume that it was not war rhetoric. They are serious about it. Now, supreme leader has named 4 or 5 successors. This is what I've read in the newspapers of Iran. Now, by naming successor, he's made sure that the regime stays intact. The regime is not going to change. The face will change. Secondly, with the Iran coming attack from Israel, US mounting attacks on their nuclear facilities, it is highly likely, in fact, it is common sense that their people will now rally around their supreme leader. So it is unthinkable how that regime change can happen. And let's not forget, Iran is a country with great depth. They have great depth of intellectuals, religious leaders, military commanders, administrators, just like India. So in such a country, removing a couple of people is not going to lead to the collapse of the system. That's my assessment.
All right. My final question, ma'am, we just have about a minute left, but if you could sum up the challenges for India now. Clearly, we get about 40% of our oil supply through the Strait of Hormuz. So yes, oil inflation is one impact, but strategically, how are we likely to be challenged in case of a prolonged war in the region?
One, contamination, exposure to our people, and we have people in the Gulf. It could come right up to us in case there's a nuclear issue. Second, the expats community in the Gulf region may start coming back if the war spreads, which it will in case it is not stopped now. Third, the disturbance of the Strait of Hormuz, even if they don't close it for India, is going to disrupt the sea lanes of communication, which is a big thing for trade, apart from energy and oil and gas, etc., then our vessels, our people may be caught in crossfire. Let's not forget. So Iran is our region. Iran is part of West Asia, but Iran is as much our region because of the kind of connections that we have and the kind of proximity that we have. So I think it's a source of worry for India, and we should actively plan about it.
It is indeed a source of worry for India. Thank you so much, Ms. Anju Gupta, for joining us with that perspective. Very important answers there on the possibility of regime change and why it may not yield any major results for the United States or Israel. Time for a short break, but coming up on the other side, space promotion body InSpace has facilitated the transfer of small satellite launch vehicle technology from ISRO to Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The move is expected to make HAL the only company in the country to be authorized to make SSLV rockets. A special conversation with InSpace Chairman Pavan Goenka on that and more. Welcome back. You're watching News Center. In a major development in India's space promotion and supervisory body, InSpace has facilitated the transfer of SSLV technology. SSLV is Small Satellite Launch Vehicle technology, and it has been transferred from ISRO to Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, a Government of India PSU. HAL was selected from among 3 bidders. The entire technology transfer will be completed in 2 years, while initially HAL would be looking at manufacturing 2 small satellite launch vehicles. It would eventually become the only company in the country which will be authorized to make SSLV rockets. I caught up with InSpace Chairman Pavan Goenka about this development. I began by asking him about the cost that HAL will incur for this tech transfer.
The winning bid from HAL was 511 crores. That's how much they'll be paying over a period of 2 years for the technology transfer. And after that, they will complete ownership they will have of the design, non-exclusive. The patents will not get transferred. Patents remain with ISRO. But they'll be able to make, they'll be able to change the design. They'll be able to change sources from which they buy components. And any development they do beyond that will be their patent.
Right.
But 511 crores is how much they are paying to acquire rights for this technology.
Right. We've also seen from the statement by InSpace that there will be 2 SSLV launches that are being aimed at in the next 2 years by HAL. Could you tell us more about that?
No, so it's a little more complex than that. There are 2 rockets that will be built by HAL during the period of 2 years with hand-holding from ISRO. That's the part of technology transfer. Okay? But there will be many more launches of